Hey guys, Sean Ogle of Location Rebel and Location 180. I'm really, really excited to be here today because I'm going to get to do something that I've been wanting to do for years and just haven't gotten around to doing. And that's share some of the success stories from some of the people that have been in our Location Rebel community. A lot of you know that 4 years ago I made a major transition in my life, but what you may not have realized is that we've had dozens, if not hundreds, of other people making similar and even more spectacular transitions in their own life. So for that reason, today I'm with Stephanie Halligan, who I got to know probably starting about 2 years ago. When she joined Location Rebel, she started talking about how she wanted to make some major changes in her life, pay off a lot of debt, start her own business, and that's really exactly what she's done. So I'm going to let her talk a little bit more about that. But first, I just want to say, Steph, thank you for being here today.
Yeah, so excited to be here. Just so excited to share my story and thank you for being a part of it.
No, absolutely. So first off, where are you right now? Where do you live?
I live in Washington, D.C. I've been here for about 4 years, but I grew up in Seattle, so I spend a lot of time kind of going back and forth between coasts, and having a location independent lifestyle is a great way to make those trips happen more often.
Absolutely. Got to rep the Pacific Northwest. I'm all about that.
Yep, absolutely.
So let's start a little bit at the beginning. We started talking, I think it was like December 2 years ago,
Mhm.
somewhere along those lines. Where were you at that point? You had kind of graduated school, you were working in kind of a normal day job,
Yeah.
trying to figure things out. Tell me a little bit about what you were feeling then.
Yeah. Oh man, 2 years ago. So I had been a couple years out of college, and really I was at a point where I was wondering, is this it? Is this what work life is all about?
Hmm.
Um, if I work really, really hard, 8 hours a day, someday I can get promoted and be extra busy and work 10 hours a day. So I think I was a little, at that point, I was a little kind of taking a step back and wondering what I wanted my work life to be like.
Yeah.
And then at the same time, uh, for me personally, a lot of a lot of the stress and the schedule and just the demanding hours, and which is typical of a job kind of in DC and
Hmm.
in other industries too. I was really, I think, taking a toll on my health, and was wondering if there had to be kind of another way. And the other piece too being I have family on the West Coast, I live on the East Coast, and having to save up vacation days for months and months to see them only at a certain time of the year. That started getting really hard, and I was wondering, there has to be another option. There has to be a way for me to start something, or to create the lifestyle I want and also work and make money.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something I can totally relate to. I was like, I kind of got to the point and I was like, this is it. Like,
Yeah,
all I can see in my foreseeable future is just more work. And it didn't matter if I worked 110% on my job or 10%. I kind of got paid the same amount and I wasn't building an asset for myself. I was building somebody else's business. Um,
totally. And what I realized too is the harder I worked, the more money I spent too, because I was trying to
oh,
compensate the
totally.
fact that I was stressed out. I would go out to eat more. I'd have to to buy things to make me happier. So I didn't even feel like I was making more money when I worked harder.
Yeah. So were you like I was at all? So I started thinking this. I'd been in the job maybe about a year when I really started thinking, okay, like I got to make some changes. But I had this huge like aversion to risk for a long time. Like I was terrified. I felt like I owed my boss something, and I owed it to him to stick around forever. I was terrified of what might happen if I left and ran out of money. What would my friends and family think? Did you go through any of that? Did you have any of those issues?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I struggled with that pretty hardcore. So, when I graduated from school, I had a little over $30,000 in student loans.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that's not that uncommon
Yeah.
nowadays. So I had that kind of, um, big pressure to have a consistent income and, to be able to pay those student loans. And always, I think too, the fear of not having health insurance. I went for a few years without it, when I was in college, and that was a really scary time. So it was always like, oh, the one place I'll get health insurance is an employer. So
Right.
that's a very safe situation. So in that sense, I think financially, I was super risk averse to ever giving up a secure paycheck.
Hmm.
Confidence wise, I wasn't quite sure I had the skills or the guts to make it on my own because I was a really good employee.
Yeah.
So I figured if I kept my head down, maybe that was my answer to it all. And even at one point, when I was trying to figure out how I get my personal brand out there and more thought leadership, I changed jobs thinking that was going to be the answer
Yeah.
to everything, and just realized no, it's the fact that I have a job and an employer that I'm struggling against. But the whole time, I think was really cautious and didn't even really believe that I could make the leap for financial reasons and for kind of my own
No,
personal confidence.
totally. And I know one of the things that I struggle with a lot, and it sounds like you did too, is like, what do I have to offer, on my own? Like, do I have the skills to do this? Like I said, I'm a good employee, although I don't know that I was such a good employee. Like, I kind of knew for a long time I wanted to do my own thing. I just didn't know what that was. So
Yeah.
so let's go back to like 2 years ago ish when you first contacted me and you kind of first started getting like in delving into Location Rebel and that whole thing. What were you finding when you first started thinking, okay, I want to make this transition and I want to start down this path?
Yeah. So it was really interesting. I think I stumbled across your blog and Location Rebel because I was just looking for ways to make extra money
Yeah,
on the side. I had this massive student loan debt. I'm in like the personal finance space, and I realized that I had to kind of set a good example, but also just get this off my
totally.
shoulders to make big moves later on. So initially, I think 90% of me was just interested in making money on the side in a meaningful way
Yeah,
with online, with a website, with a blog to get my brand out there, to really be an authoritative voice in personal finance in a way I wanted to make some money. And then maybe 10% of me was like, oh, and someday maybe I could have a, location independent job, or
yeah,
I could find a way to like work remotely with an employer. So that
totally.
was kind of the baby steps for me when I ran into Location Rebel.
So once you got started in the program and you started, we had a couple phone calls. We talked about the Empowered Dollar, which has grown into this, awesome brand. I was actually having coffee with someone this morning who said they were getting ready to pitch you on something. So I'm not totally sure what that
Seriously.
is. So kind of a small world. But how did Location Rebel first kind of help get you started down that path?
Yeah. And I think so Location Rebel for me really, I think, unlocked a lot of doors that I wasn't even thinking about or wasn't aware of. So
Yeah,
if, first I was um, using it to there's a blueprint in Location Rebel on negotiating a remote work agreement.
yeah,
And I actually used that first to negotiate Fridays from home
nice.
with my current employer. So it's still kind of like, okay, I still have an
Kind of ease
employer.
into it a little bit, and
Yeah,
yeah,
still gonna make it. Still gonna work a job, but I want to make this a little bit better. Then I really dove into the forums, which were really helpful because it's such an awesome, diverse community,
hmm,
and started asking questions about freelance writing, and comparing websites and seeing what other bloggers were doing. And as I grew my own blog and my own voice online, I started doing freelance writing on personal finance websites.
yeah.
And that was kind of the moment where I realized that maybe yeah, I was onto something, and maybe I could be one of those success stories in Location Rebel, that I could actually work remotely on my own and I had something of value. So I use the forums a lot for just bouncing ideas, getting rates from people, like what's the standard, how do I market myself, and then even some of the hesitation, like we talked about a little bit
Yeah.
before, that risk aversion. There was just a lot of helpful information on business structuring and taxes and the things that I think are really like into the weeds and the details that were making me nervous.
Yeah.
That once I read more about it and learned more about it with Location Rebel, I just was like, okay,
I can
this is
actually
actually
do this.
possible.
And I think
Yeah.
that you mentioned the community, which I think can be the most underrated thing. It's like there's all these blueprints and there's all this information. You can start, you can go 1,000 different directions, but the one thing that's really consistent for everybody is that you need support. You need people you can turn to. You need to feel like you're not the only person going down this road.
Yeah.
And one of the cool things about where we're at now is when you started, a lot of people were just kind of getting going. But now we're 2 years, 2.5 years down the road, and we've had all these people that have had success, such as yourself. And you guys go back in the forums and you're providing advice, you're helping. It's like this is what I've done, this is how I've helped. And I think that's one of the coolest parts about it is how willing, the people that have made it, so to speak, how willing they are to go back and help people that are just getting started. So I don't know, at least for me, that seems like a pretty unique feature that you might not see
Oh,
everywhere.
yeah, totally. I don't know where I would be without it. Just because you could throw out a random question and you know somebody in there has an answer or can point you to examples. So even just to say, what's a good example of this type of niche or affiliate website, and just to get like 10 responses afterwards was so helpful. Or to say somebody's offering me this kind of deal to write, the 500 word posts for this dollar amount. Is that reasonable? Am I
Yeah,
crazy?
totally.
Bouncing ideas off the wall. It was just so helpful and reassuring to know that there you could share your successes and you could share your failures and your concerns in a really safe environment where everyone had your back. Yeah, I love the forums.
So that's cool. So, that was when you kind of got started. You built up the empowered dollar. You paid off an unbelievable amount of student loan debt in a really
Yeah.
short period of time. What's happened in the last couple months? Because I know things have
Oh man.
you've gone through some pretty major changes.
Yeah. So as I started earning more money on the side, um, I I started believing that it was totally possible and seeing more and more people making this leap. I realized I had to really tackle the student loan debt issue
Yeah.
in a really meaningful way so that I could comfortably, as a very risk averse person, I could take the leap and know that I had that kind of weight off my shoulders. Um, so yeah, a couple months ago, I made my final student loan payment, and that was over $35,000 in 4 years.
Oh my
Just
gosh! Congratulations for one.
thank you, thank you. Just being super aggressive, making a lot of money on the side, being really mindful of my budget and all that, and really, I think laying out the foundation over the last couple months for what my transition was going to look like. Because I do a kind of a combination of consulting for organizations and one-on-one personal finance coaching
Mhm.
and freelance writing. So it was really important to me that I had a good transition, out of my old employer, because I still actually consult for them in kind of the personal finance space.
Got it.
So I laying kind of the foundation was really important for me. But then October hit and I paid off all my debt, and then a week later left my job. I'd given them enough notice, but had and then dove headfirst into my own consulting practice and personal finance coaching and freelance writing, and
Oh
here
my
I
gosh.
am a couple months later.
So are you? And correct me if I'm wrong, but you kind of got started. You were starting to make money on the side, and that was mostly through like freelance writing, just getting started, right? And
Yeah.
that's something I've kind of talked a lot about. Build up a little bit of income, build up the confidence to know that you can make money on your own, and then you can kind of expand into more things from there. And that's really what you've done. You took like the one thing that you knew a lot about,
Yeah.
personal finance. You wrote about it, and then you've since expanded into other types of consulting and coaching. And so, earlier you were mentioning you do like personal finance coaching, one-on-one personal finance coaching. What exactly does that mean? What does that look like?
Yeah. So, as I was going through the process of paying back kind of massive amounts of student debt, I was sharing my story on the Empowered Dollar, and it seemed to resonate with a lot of people. The thing, I'd share the things I was struggling with, the successes I had. But then by the time I paid off my student loans, I had just a lot of people asking me for help in some direction
Yeah.
because they either were stuck with their finances, they didn't know where to go next, or they felt a little helpless, especially with the student loan
Yeah.
burden. Because that just is so overwhelming to have tens of thousands of dollars.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
yeah, and once I quit my job, since I had more time, I just decided that so many people were asking me for help. I wanted to launch that one-on-one personal finance coaching so that I could help people no matter what their goal was, if they wanted to quit their job or just feel better because they were debt-free and not have to worry about that, but to come up with a personalized plan
Yeah.
to do what they needed to do with their money.
That is, I don't know. It's so cool to sit here and hear this story about the evolution, back from when we first talked, years ago to now we've seen each other in person a couple times, like, and you've done the full transition from absolutely terrified, oh my God, what do I do? How am I going to make this happen? Like,
Yep.
I'm never going to get up the guts to do this, to starting to make a little bit of money, to starting a brand, which is now, I mean, you were voted best new blog at FinCon, right?
Oh my gosh, that was such an awesome award to receive. Yeah, I got Best New Personal Finance Blog. about a week after I quit and 2 weeks after I paid off my
Oh,
student
see,
loan. So
it's so
it
cool to
was,
see that evolution. So
it was
for
awesome.
people that are in the position that I was years ago, that you were in 2 years ago, they're in a job they don't like. They want to own their own business. They want to kind of take control of their life. Maybe they're thinking of joining Location Rebel, or they've just joined and are getting started. What advice would you give to that person who's just kind of starting to make that transition?
Yeah, that's a good one. The advice I wish I had, or I wish I had taken to heart, was don't wait for perfection. Like, don't hold out for the perfect idea or product or website or moment
Yeah,
because it will never be perfect and it will never happen. I mean, I sat on the idea of my blog for, even a year, I think, before I met you
yeah.
and before I joined Location Rebel. And I'm glad it is where it is today, and it's good. But I was waiting for it to be perfect, and also too, I really hesitated to leave my job because I was waiting for the perfect moment,
Yeah.
like the perfect amount of savings, the perfect amount of work lined up,
Yep.
and there's no such thing. And I think the best thing you can do if you're just starting out is to try small things and see where it takes you. Because I had no idea that just a few freelance writing gigs would open up the door to so many new things and now my own business
Oh,
today.
absolutely. And it's like that was the same thing. I was kind of waiting for the perfect thing, waiting for the perfect moment. And realistically, that's never going to be there. It's kind of, you just
No.
have to kind of start putting things out there. I mean, and even with the blog, I know when you started the Empowered Dollar, we had some conversations where, it's like I'm putting all this stuff up there and, no one's looking at it. How do I spread that message? How do you find the perfect formula for what works? And, now 2 years later, you're voted, best new personal finance blog at like the biggest personal finance conference there is.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a really cool story of just kind of sticking with it, trying different things, and then seeing that evolution. So
Yeah, absolutely. And the only way you're going to even get close to perfection is testing it and trying it.
yeah,
So waiting for that moment is it will do you a disservice and just try it. Yeah.
and the sooner you start testing, you start throwing out ideas, you start trying different things, the sooner one you can fail on many of them and
Yeah.
shift gears and actually get a few things working really well, which then always tend to kind of expand and really allow you to grow your own business and build your life into what you kind of always knew it could be and what you wanted it to be. Um,
Yeah,
it,
totally. And I will say too, once I made the leap, the opportunities that came my way because I had the time and the energy and could announce that I was available were unbelievable.
I think
And so that was incredible to see that.
that is so important. I wish I'd mentioned that earlier because that's one of the biggest things I've seen is when, like, for instance, when I was in my job, nobody came up to me with, hey, how would you like to do this for me? How would you like to do this? It's because you're not in a position to accept it. You're not in a position to let opportunity find you. And a lot of people say, hey, you're really lucky to have had all these opportunities. I was like, no, I just put myself in a position to be lucky. And that's one of the
Yeah.
things I've seen over and over again is once you have a little bit going, you make that leap and you've kind of set yourself up for luck or success, that's when opportunities just kind of magically start, finding their way to you. And that's pretty cool. So I'm glad to
Absolutely.
see that that's what happened
Yeah.
with you.
It's
Um,
a very, very cool feeling.
so anyway, I don't want to take up any more of your time. I want to thank you so much for sitting down, talking to people. I know, Location Rebel right now, it's a $497 investment, which is a little bit more than what it was when you joined. And so it's a big decision for people. I don't take that lightly. It's not like it's something that people are like, oh yeah, I'm just going to buy this today and whatever. So it's really cool to be able to hear your story and see in action how this can kind of be an aid to help get you down the path to the life that you're working on. So
Yeah, and I live and my life is so wealthy right now. I think I'm going to actually make more money next year than I would have if I stayed with my job. But on top of that, it's priceless. It's the lifestyle, the work I'm doing. It really is. It's just incredible. It's such a good investment to have that kind of community and support behind you.
awesome. Well, thank you so much for doing this. If people want to find out more about your blog, your consulting, all that stuff, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Yeah, so you can check out my blog, empowereddollar.com. You find me on Twitter, same handle, Empowered Dollar. Read some of my posts. Reach out to me if you're interested in one-on-one personal finance coaching and you got to dump debt too and to make the transition. But Yeah, and shoot me questions too. I'd love to just, share more details about my story with anyone who's interested.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, and I hope you have a great weekend, and we'll talk to you soon.
Great. Thanks, Sean.
Thanks, Steph.